We're going to be starting our face jugs today. So I'm going to demonstrate the first step in that process, and then you can go over and get started right away. So here's a couple samples of what I have done, and I'm going to show you today how you're going to roll what we call a slab of clay and then form it around an armature, which is kind of like a skeleton for clay, and make it into a cylinder. So let's get started. You're going to begin with a piece of clay that's about the size of a softball. And the first step is going to be to kind of roll it around in your hands and try to make it as smooth and round as you can without taking too much time. If we hold clay in our hands too long, it starts to get dry and hard. And when it does that, it cracks. We don't want to have clay that cracks when you start to roll it out. So I just kind of use my finger to smooth out some of the bigger creases and rolled it around in my hand, and that looks pretty good. So it's about the size of a softball. The next thing you're going to do is flatten it with the palm of your hand. Try to avoid using your fingers. You want to just use the palm of your hand, and what you're going to do is something called the hand over hand technique, where you put one hand down, put the other on top, and just press as hard as you can. Avoiding using your fingers makes it so the clay stays pretty smooth. If I was using this part of my fingers, I would have like little ridges and bumps in here. So I pressed it down several times, and then I'm going to turn it over and repeat that process. Our goal is to make our clay into a really thin kind of pancake. I've provided you with a pattern to know how big that your slab needs to be. So each person's going to have a piece of newspaper that's the correct size. So your goal is to make your slab match your piece of newspaper. Now at first it seems like it's never going to happen because this just seems really long to try to get your slab to cooperate. But with a few simple tricks, you can make it work. So I did the hand over hand technique twice to get that going. Then what I can do, another technique, is kind of like throwing the slab down, and it's a little bit hard to see on the video, but what I'm doing is kind of throwing it down, but not straight down. I'm kind of throwing it kind of toward me a little bit, and I can demonstrate this more in person as we get going. It might be one of those things that you kind of have to see to understand, see for yourself exactly. But see how that, I was throwing it down and it made it get elongated. So, wow, almost like magic, it's now almost the right size, just in a few throws down on the table. So I'm going to do that a couple more times. And each time it's getting longer. So I'm throwing it kind of at an angle toward me, and as I do, it stretches, and voila, there it is. It is the exact right size. Now, one thing that I've noticed is that it's a little lumpy bumpy here. You can't see it on the video, but as I run my hands through here, there's like a high spot right here in the middle. What you can do is use a rolling pin and just kind of finish off the job. If you want it to be perfectly even and smooth, there's some rolling pins you can go over it with. And I noticed that I've got a little spot there, but that won't matter. That won't matter one bit. And put that back on. And then I'm going to trim around the outside with my fettling knife. So again, kind of use this like you would an X-Acto knife or any other kind of tool of that nature, and we're going to just trace with it right next to the paper, and then that piece of clay will pull away. And we're going to do that all the way around. Doesn't have to be perfect, so don't spend a lot of time making it, you know, super precise. Your extra clay is going to be put back with the clay where we got it out of so that the next class can use it. Okay, so now I've got my piece of clay all ready to go, and I'm going to pull off the newspaper. This is really important. So you've just got your rectangle of clay. Now here comes the part that I called an armature. You're going to recognize this as a section of a pool noodle. And I cut the pool noodle into sections that were about as big as our face jugs are going to be. And what you're going to do is take that newspaper and just wrap it around the pool noodle. Now I use that word armature, and armature is just a fancy word for any kind of support to hold a sculpture or clay piece that isn't strong enough to stand up on its own. So if I just tried to take my slab and roll it up, it's going to be a weird looking cylinder because it's not going to be very regular. So my armature is going to hold it in a circular shape until it gets a little bit drier. So I picked up my rectangle off of my sheet, and then I'm just going to put the armature right down in the middle. If you want to put the seam of the paper down onto the clay so it doesn't get away from you, and then all you need to do is pick up the side of it, and then we're just going to roll it all the way around. And you're going to see that there's a little section where it overlaps. Okay? That's where we need to score and slip. So I'm going to take one of my scoring tools. I can use this brown one, or I can use the metal one. Because this clay is pretty soft, I'm just going to use the wooden one. It's kind of rounded on the sides. And I'm going to scratch in the clay right there, just on one side. You don't need to do both sides. And then you're going to take some slip, and you're just going to run that slip right over the top. Again, doesn't have to be precise. It could be kind of messy. Nobody cares. And then you're going to just press that together on the edge, like so. It could be a little off, like mine is off right here a little bit, but we can definitely trim that up later. No need to worry. So at this point, you got a couple choices. You can leave it just like that so that you have the edge showing, which I kind of like. I kind of like seeing that edge because later on, if you have that edge showing, you'll have an opportunity to decorate around it. So you can see on this example that I left the edge right here. There's that overlap. And then I was able to use some various tools to press in here to make some designs. I even rolled some little bits of clay for little buttons and stamped in there. So if you leave that, you're going to have an opportunity to decorate and make that edge really fun. Now some people, it really bothers them and they want that edge to be smoothed out. If that's you, it's okay. And you can do that. You can smooth it. So you would just take your thumb and run it across there. I will warn you, this way is a lot harder because what happens is you've got all this extra clay that you then need to smooth out and deal with somehow. But it is an option to do. If you would rather have that be nice and smooth, then you go ahead and smooth that out. And you just use your thumb to do that. Okay. Then we're going to let this dry overnight. And tomorrow, next day we come in, we can take the armature out from the inside, and this whole thing will be stiffened up, and we'll be able to add the base to the bottom.